Dr. Sahu, Behram, Shendra, Pooja, and all our participants, welcome all to this webinar. This is the SIG 24 Samvad Web Series 2020. We are going to start with it today and probably have about 7 sessions with respect to the same. And we are all passing through crisis, so resolution professionals will be no exception to it. The life is changing, everything around us is changing. And Dr. Sahu said a minute ago, but for the internet and everything and all these webs, we probably will never be able to see each other for a long time. Many people have not seen their own children except probably seeing them on the telephones or mobiles or looking at each other's pictures. But in these times of crisis, it's time that the resolution professionals and the insolvency will have to have a look. Welcome you all. I don't need to introduce anyone. I just want to say, Dr. Sahu, as soon as you took over the lead in 2016, we have come to this age only because you led us from the front. Continue to lead us even in these times of crisis. I'm sure we'll pass this time too and reach higher heights. We are looking forward for a very meaningful discussion. We have experts in insolvency with Dr. Sahu leading us. And over to you, Pooja, and welcome you all.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Dr. Sahu to give an inaugural address, and after that we'll start the session.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for inviting me for this program. I think this is just after, on the last working day of the last week, we had an ordinance. And this is the 5th in the series. So I don't think there's any precedent anywhere in 3 years. We have 5 major legislative interventions. But this legislation, this intervention has suspended section 7, 9, and 10. But when these sections were in force, some people had problems. They wanted a repeal of the entire act even. But now that these sections are suspended, some people have also problem. They want the suspension should be withdrawn. So we have a strange problem. If you have IBC, there is a problem. If you do not have IBC, there is a problem. So let me tell you a story, which I used also 2 days back in another program. 2 school-going friends, they had a crazy idea. They rounded up 3 goats from the neighborhood and painted numbers 1, 2, and 4 on their sides. They let these goats loose inside the school premises. The next morning when the authorities entered the school, they could smell that something is wrong. They soon could find out 3 goats were there, but they are worried that where was the goat number 3? They spent rest of the day looking for the goat number 3, but they could never find it simply because it didn't exist. So for some of us, absence of something is always larger than the presence of many things. So I'm using this story to tell 2 things in the context of the insolvency and insolvency professionals. Section 10A has come in, like all our previous amendments. When something important is done, we put a capital A. We have 12A, 29A, 240A, now we have 10A. So 10A says that section 7, 9, 10 applications, no applications for corporate insolvency process, shall be filed for any default on or after 25th March 2020 for a period of 6 months or such further period not exceeding 1 year as may be notified by the government, depending on how the COVID story unfolds further. Suspension is only this much, but people read that as if the entire IBC has been suspended and everything is lost. So it is not suspension of IBC even for 6 months. It is a suspension of filing of applications under sections 7, 9, and 10 in respect of a default arising during the COVID period. That period is yet to be fully defined, but it does not suspend Section 7, 9, 10 in respect of defaults arising outside the COVID period, either prior or after, does not suspend default arising during the COVID period for purposes other than initiation of a CIRP. It is not exclusion under Section 312 of the code. It is only a proviso in Section 10A and for a limited purpose. It does not suspend applications already filed before the adjudicating authority under those sections and pending for admission. Does not suspend ongoing corporate insolvency resolution, corporate liquidation, and voluntary liquidation proceedings. Does not suspend the provisions relating to and ongoing individual insolvency proceedings. Also does not suspend provisions relating to and ongoing insolvency proceedings against financial service providers. In any case, this is being talked mostly from the perspective of the creditors, whose main focus has been the recovery. The menu available for creditors in case of a default is quite long. If one is interested in recovery, IBC is not an option for the creditor. He may resort to, he has many other options starting from civil court to recovery of debts and bankruptcy, DRT, Bankruptcy Act 1993, SURFACI Act 2002. But if it is interested in the resolution, it has again many other options to use statutory court-supervised compromise or arrangement under the Companies Act 13. One may also use the 7th June RBI directive for resolution of distressed assets. One can simply sit across a table and work out a solution. And as it is said, necessity is the mother of invention. I'm sure the stakeholders would find out, explore innovative options in these challenging times. So what is suspended is only a limited part. Almost the entire IBC is there, civil courts are there, DRT is there, SURFACI is there, Companies Act there, RBI directive is there. And it is not that every resolution has to happen under a compulsion. Why people are asking for this is that we want some kind of a binding nature of this on everybody. But why do we need it to be binding? Because we are depriving somebody of something. That's why we are saying that let this be forcefully accepted by somebody else. And we want that the resolution is limited only to haircuts or restructuring. The IBC envisages any n ways of resolution. It could mean introduction of a new technology, new product line, better marketing. It can mean anything, merger, amalgamation. So you need something like IBC when you want to force something on somebody and you want to give a haircut to somebody. But except this, if you are really interested in the resolution, nothing is gone, and if you are interested in the recovery, many things, everything remains intact. I think one should focus on what the debtors and creditors have today rather than what they do not have, and they should not look for the goat number 3. Similarly, in the case of the insolvency professionals, there is a feeling that probably with this the work is gone. They have no work. They set up some boutique shops everywhere in the country. There is no work. But again, there are 10,000 plus applications pending for initiation of a CIRP with the adjudicating authority at the admission stage. Imagine over last 3 years, about 13,000-14,000 similar applications have been disposed by NCLT. Of them, 4,000 resulted in the admission. The rest got somewhere or other resolved or withdrawn or whatever. So almost the same amount of 10,000 applications are pending for disposal now. 2,000 plus ongoing CRPs, 1,000 plus ongoing liquidations, 500 plus ongoing voluntary liquidations. Fresh applications are allowed for the defaults on or before 25th March. Special resolution framework for MSME, of which Finance Minister has already indicated that is coming also. There is also work has started on the individual insolvency, particularly the fresh start process. And as Mr. Chandiyog was referring just before we started it, he was referring to a talk Justice Kaul had with him about the how can IPs be used. There can be manual for IPs to take a more active role in mediation and negotiation, arbitration, some kind of understanding. So all these are possible because these are. In fact, I was party to that discussion, Mr. Chandiyog Sahab. I think on the last Saturday only, there was a Niti Aayog organized a program on that. I was there. And I could feel that, yes, there is a lot of scope to use this kind of, they were talking about online dispute resolution. I think quite a bit of, at least the fresh start process, which is almost mechanical. It is on an online platform, say in UK. Debt relief orders are issued as a matter of right, and it comes to somebody files and gets it, and there's no human intervention. There is a checkbox, 10 items are checked, and the debt relief order is passed. It should be possible to use the insolvency professionals through ODR, in FSP and individual insolvency, and also this MSME package which are being talked about, if not for corporate MSMEs, but for non-corporate MSMEs, I think it is possible to use. And I would request actually INSOL and CP, if possible, they come out with a manual. In fact, we should prepare the IPs to do that work before we ask for the work. So some kind of, if there's a manual, some kind of training happens, we are in a better position to roll out those programs. So these professionals, in addition to this work, they have huge demand in restructuring services. So to me, what they have on table is much more than what they can take, given that there are only 3,000 insolvency professionals. Similarly, let's focus again on what we have and not look for the missing goat. So COVID-19, I would make only one more submission. I think I have 10 minutes or so. This has been an enigma for all of us. We do not know what we are in and what the future holds for us. Immediate response in March was, let's take a pause, have a lockdown. We hope things will tide over, hoping that world would return to normal at best in months. But since that didn't work out, instead what has unfolded before us in the last 2 months, we are in a long haul with no quick resolution in sight. It's fast snowballing into an economic crisis. Some believe that it may hurt deeper than the deepest health pandemonium 1980 Spanish flu, or the worst economic disaster 1930 Great Depression, or even the most devastating financial crash we had 2008 financial crisis. Maybe it may be deeper than all of them put together. So such a rarest of the rare black swan event requires a matching response from us to save the lives and livelihood. And this extraordinary challenge has brought in, I would consider the change that has been made in IBC is also a befitting response to the challenge we had. See, our IBC is designed, let me go to a little very briefly to the basics. It is designed that somebody has started a business has failed, firms in the market economy failed to deliver as planned, mostly on account of 2 reasons. One is competition, one is innovation. One is that the firm belongs to an industry where every other firm is doing well, but this firm is not doing well for endogenous reasons such as its own inability to compete at marketplace. These firms are in a financial distress. They need to be rescued well in time from the clutches of current management, put in the hands of the credible, capable management to avoid liquidation. The second category is that farm belongs to an industry where the entire industry is not doing well for exogenous reasons, such as policy changes, mostly on account of innovation. These farms we call have economic distress and are generally unviable, and only option is to release the resources of the farm as well as the entrepreneur to pursue other emerging opportunities. So this is all IBC gives a market mechanism to deal with a situation when a farm is not doing well or when an entire industry is not doing well. It is not strictly designed to deal with the rarest of the rare black swan event like COVID-19, when not the economy, not one economy, all the economies in the world are not 22nd of March. We have an association of restaurant owners. They gave a call that they have 6 lakh members. So they closed down 6 lakh. They closed down 6 lakh restaurants at one go. And there are many more restaurants, all of them are not members. So if all 10 lakh restaurants have been closed down, that do not have business for last 4 months, all of them are incurring loss. And we have a mechanism where we say resolution requires a white knight to come from outside who is more resourceful, more capable, can take over this restaurant business. Where do we get people who will come over and take these 10 lakh restaurants? Leaving aside the capacity of insolvency professionals, NCLT, whether they can handle so many insolvencies, and we know data-wise, whenever there was crisis, particularly in the 2008 financial crisis, there's a sharp rise, almost doubling the number of applications filed for insolvencies, and also the percentage of companies getting into liquidation is much more during these times. So the situation is that we can have academic debate that let market find its own level, let firms go through the IBC process if they are not doing well. But as I told you, this provides a market mechanism to rescue a viable farm. And it also provides a market mechanism to liquidate an unviable farm. Both the functions the insolvency code expects, both the functions should happen. But if IBC is on today, you do not get the enough white knights, many viable farms would have premature liquidation. But if you do not have it, many unviable farms will not be liquidated. Now the choice is between whether you rescue viable farms or liquidate unviable farms. While it is necessary that both have to be done, but under the current circumstances, which one, when there is a choice between if it is on while we try to pursue both the objectives, we will be reaching a situation where viable farms will be closed as well as unviable farms will be closed. So I don't think IBC, which was created to protect the lives of the companies, can be used to take away the lives of the companies. It is more important, supposing there is an unviable company which we are not able to liquidate. Does not matter, you can liquidate it tomorrow. It can be liquidated next year. So this is a bad situation if we are not able to liquidate an unviable company, but it is a bad situation. It can be rectified. But if you liquidate a viable company today, it can never be rectified, and this is more dangerous. And that is what this code, this last amendment tries to achieve, that it is more important to save a viable company if there is a choice. If there is no choice, both can be done, and in normal circumstances, it's well and good. But now we are confronted with a choice whether you want to rescue viable companies or close on viable companies. The choice goes in favor of the first, and that is what this insolvency and bankruptcy amendment ordinance has done. I think with this I'll close, and let's move to the panel discussion. If there is something I would respond. Thank you.
We'll start with the panel discussion now. There's no gainsaying that all businesses and the Indian economy in general is facing the heat because of COVID-19. The companies which are undergoing corporate insolvency resolution processes are no exceptions. For some of these companies, it's even more difficult because to begin with, these companies were cash strapped and were in financial difficulties. Plus, there is a mandate on IPs to keep the companies running as a going concern and also undertake all the compliances. Today in this panel, we will discuss some of the challenges faced by these companies in CIRP. As Dr. Sahu mentioned, we have currently 2,000 companies undergoing corporate insolvency resolution process, and we will discuss how the IPs of these companies is facing COVID-19. So Shailendra, let me start with you. Do you think in these COVID-19 times, there is a need for IPs to reorient themselves and shift their priorities and focus on certain things? For instance, I think one of the biggest issues that IPs are facing is the liquidity constraint and cash flow challenges. Is there any way in which IPs can preserve cash in these times? Over to you, Shailendra.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Pooja. Absolutely an important question in terms of all the IPs currently conducting the CIRP. Before I get on to the liquidity aspect, one of the most important element really what RPs need to focus on at this point in time is really the communication. I think given that most of us have not been able to attend the office physically, both from the corporate offices as well as from the factories, I think first and foremost is the communication, and communication to the COCs, communication to the employees, communication to the creditors, and more importantly, where the implementation is in process, communication with the RA is absolutely very important. So I think the way we were used to communicating every 10 days or 15 days to a COC needs to be far more regular now, predominantly because all the stakeholders at any point in time are looking for much quicker feedback in terms of how the lockdown is affected, how the unlocking is going to happen, how is the market looking at. So that to my mind is one of the key aspects in terms of doing a regular communication with all the stakeholders. Secondly, to my mind, what is the enhanced MIS mechanism which the RP and all the other stakeholders are receiving? Because as I said, most of us are unable to attend the offices and the factories. How do you empower the key managerial personnel with suitable protocols in place to take timely decisions, whether those timely decisions are in terms of production planning, marketing, dealing with the employees, etc. So that's another aspect which is absolutely critical, which as an RP we are looking for to provide adequate and appropriate information to the other stakeholders. The third important aspect is the physical security of all the fixed assets and inventory. From a process perspective, I think a lot of these areas are in far-flung places where one needs to reassess whether there is any threat, and if there is need to be any implementation or any further addition which needs to be done to the security. That's one other aspect. The fourth aspect which all of us need to be very, very cognizant about the fact is this whole untimely flight of all the labor which has happened. So really on a case-to-case basis, one really needs to understand as to at what capacities are we dealing with right now. How is the market going to go up? When the unlocking happens, what is the production we are going to do such that we are doing the production efficiently so that we don't produce more and keep the produced material at the factory. Plus, how is the labor situation both from the full-time as well as from the contractor's perspective? What is the availability going to be and what arrangements are going to be made? So that's another fourth point. The fifth point is also dealing with the local administrations, the district collectors, etc., because over the last 3 months, over the last 2 months rather, all these plants where more than 500,000 people are working, the kind of scrutiny which we have seen and the kind of information people have required at the local district level is quite high. So that's something which we need to focus on. Lastly, coming on to the point on liquidity, I mean, in any case, once a company goes into an IBC, RP is only dealing with the opening working capital, which is really available for him to run the show. And in this situation where the account receivables get locked up and the inventory gets locked up for the reason of non-movement, the problem just accentuates. So I think, from a perspective as to how the cost rationalization is going to happen, focusing the expenses on the focus areas, just making sure that the expenses are spent right. The working capital cycle, basically, expediting all the collections, renegotiating contracts with the contractors, with the creditors, with the suppliers. Also, any kind of non-core assets which are available, this is probably the best time. How do you get all the tax assets which are available to you? So and also making sure that there is limitation on only to the critical capexes. So all those kinds of things will have to be absolutely kept in mind, because we are anyway in a situation where the working capital is hard to come by, and we just need to make the best of it. So these are the 4 or 5 operating level points which an RP is sort of dealing with, and better we come out ahead of the curve is better it is. And I don't see this sort of changing over the next 3-4 months as well, because even if the lockdown opening up, I don't expect the availability at the plant and the offices going beyond 50-60%. So there will be some kind of a virtual management which is going to happen. But the good part is, both from the bank's perspective, the cultural acceptability of seeing the RPs on the video is now okay. So you can conduct as big as COCs or steering committees or management committees, and it is absolutely fine and it's working well. So this lockdown has actually taught us that. Over to you.
I agree with you. I mean, I've attended a fair share of COCs online, and it's always interesting to see how everyone is adapting to it. So that's always good. Dr. Sahu, one of the key questions that every IP that I've spoken to has is around exclusion timelines. We have the IBBI notification which talks about exclusion of timeline, lockdown period, for lockdown announced by the central government. We have the Honorable NCLAT order which says that lockdown by central government as well as state governments can be excluded from the overall time period. I think the difficulty and the challenges which the RPs are facing right now is whether we are in the exclusion zone or not, given the fact that we are currently in Unlock 1.0. Some areas are open, some are not open. There are some areas that are containment zones. We have travel restrictions. There are restrictions as far as diligences can be concerned. Given all of this, is it safe to assume that the RPs are still within the zone of exclusion?
Okay. So I think the IPs are not ordinary professionals. And many of them really do not like any spoon feeding or ready-made solutions coming from outside. Because every CIRP is a unique process. Like you talked about the liquidity, IPs are known to handle sick companies only. They are a kind of now the caregiver, like today in Corona times, doctors are caregivers. They do not talk that this patient is coming to us at a much later stage and quite condition is not good. We have seen in our initial days, today also we have data of the companies which have come into CIRP. Majority of them, 60-70% of them, were in BIFR, defunct, having negative net worth, not going concerns. But then where was the liquidity then when our IPs handled those things? There is no liquidity. So nothing that any additional problem has come up. They have been struggling with these situations, and it all depends on the leadership of the IP and how he is able to take COC with him. The confidence he gives, and as Mr. Ajmera talked about the communication ability. Communication. Today you find the prime ministers, the chief ministers are trying to communicate with the citizens. The times are such that you have to talk to stakeholders, and stakeholders should have faith and confidence in you. That is actually if you cross that stage, then the helping hands will come from everywhere. And I see also from this question answer, some of my friends have made a point that the IPs and advocates have to move away from adversarial process. Very, very, very right observation. We have actually, in the name of somehow we want to cling on to the old order because we had a vested interest or we have benefited in some way or other. We wanted to go repeatedly to Supreme Court on the same issue again and again, knowing well that we don't have a case. And it is the, we people prefer sometimes for our personal ego or whatever, I do not want to say that. So we create the adversarial situation. Insolvency profession, insolvency process is not expected to be adversarial process. And if you remember, I remember this very early days. This is a March 2017 judgment of Mr. Prakash Kumar of NCLT, where he told many things and told that this is the law given by the parliament to us and this nowhere talks about the adversarial system. So we have to move away from that kind of fighting because we are now all trying to save a patient, a drowning person. How can we fight among ourselves while we are giving care to the other? So as regards timelines, again, there cannot be any rigid formula. To the extent broad parameters can be given, IBBI gave a broad parameter through the regulations, NCLAT gave a broad parameter, but then when you apply things to a particular situation, that situation could be unique. As you told, there are containment zones, but again with the containment zones, some work is happening. It's not that everything is closed. So I do not know today if Delhi is under lockdown, but many things are working. Only suggestion I would make is that I should not be taking the excuse of lockdown to get the extension of time. Only when really I am not able to do because of the lockdown, then only, and I am not covered by the broad framework given by the IBBI regulation and the NCLAT order, then I can knock at the door of the NCLT for a specific relief. Even otherwise, at this time, NCLT, LAT, up to Supreme Court, everybody has been accommodative. So if you have a genuine problem, please go and approach them, but do not take this as an excuse or a right, and therefore, because you have some excuse to fall back, you will delay the process and you will seek the extension.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. Thank you for your advice. Behram, I want to now focus on some of the legal challenges that the IPs have been facing. And one is around compliance. There is an increased compliance that is required from the IPs because of the unique situation we are in, be it health-related compliances or compliance with various notifications that have been issued by MHA, central government, state governments, etc. And I think one of the biggest concerns that the IPs have had is around employment and around the salaries and wages during the lockdown period. There is, of course, the MHA notification that was there, which said that there has to be a mandatory payment to the employees and staff. But the concerns that a lot of IPs have expressed is around liquidity and cash, where is the cash to pay the employees? And secondly, even around rationalization of workforce. Is it something which is possible in these scenarios? Or do you think there'll be higher scrutiny of any such actions done by IPs?
No, thank you very much, and thanks a lot for this opportunity. I think I should start by saying that IPs have generally done an excellent job in these circumstances. And as Dr. Sahu says, thank God that we have this technology. Some of us, use it better than others, which I'm certainly in that others camp. But I think they have latched onto it very well, and that has saved the day to a large extent. And you will have, more experience than me. But I think the COCs also, my colleagues have told me in some ways are even more efficient and don't last that long. So there are some silver linings there. And I also like to reiterate this whole thing about, the IBC ordinance, that I think it came out very well finally. Yes, all of us can go for perfection and have some nits in it, but largely, I think it was a very fair and good result, because those who are affected by COVID, no doubt, need the leniency. While those, I was, of the view that those who did not, they should not just benefit from it. And then there would have been a huge, as it is, there's this 10,000 cases. If we had had a complete ban, then it would have, when the time came for NCLT and the courts and the entire infrastructure and ecosystem to cope, would have been very, very difficult. Now, ideally, just very quickly, if I can say on that, I think Dr. Sahu has already alluded to it, but the corporate filings under Section 10, I think that is maybe a little more debatable. If a guy is putting up his hands and saying he cannot manage, then why his liquidation should be delayed, I'm not sure. But the feedback I got was that the FICCIs and CIIs of the world wanted that. I'm not sure if corporate India thought that through, but so be it. And there's another point which I think you may come to in a little while, is that the cases after 25th March, those can never be taken to IBC, those defaults. So, what happens to those? But the intent seems very, very clear. So obviously, the draftsman had a clear view on this. Coming back to your questions, yes, these are very difficult questions for everyone, not only IBC, but I'm sure you'll agree that all the employment and real estate lawyers have been extremely busy, because naturally everyone has taken the view that they have to downsize, we have to cut costs. And then there was this whole tussle which you mentioned in the courts as well. And I think the courts have just now kind of given it a stay. And there was a bit of a strange situation at one time where you were not allowed to reduce the salaries, but it was debatable whether you could reduce the workforce. So in a way, you nudging people to reduce the workforce and make the guy lose his job rather than reduce his salary. So I think all this will play out, and God willing, we are, much more than halfway through. And from next month, I really hope things will start looking up. But these are very difficult issues. And I also get the point that credit to the large corporates, the credit is available. The issue is that it's not available even to SMEs. Then where are you going to get it for the distressed companies and for those that are in CIRP process and interim finance? But there again, liquidity is huge. I mean, we all know that now 8 lakh crores are being parked with RBI. So the money is there. I think somehow through all these, the government has done a lot through all the guarantee schemes, the FLDG that they have come out with. So through all that, I think the IPs have to keep pushing to try and avail of whatever credit they can get, up to whatever extent IBC allows, try and sell and monetize some assets. And yes, like every company is doing, certainly reduce the workforce where that is merited and your hands are tied, you have absolutely no choice.
Thanks, Behram. Shailendra, let's talk about the resolution process now, in terms of different stages of the resolution process and how they are getting impacted by COVID-19. Are you seeing any particular challenges in due diligence which are being conducted by resolution applicants? What is the view overall on submission of resolution plans, extension of timelines for that?
Yeah, so Pooja, thanks for that question. I think I can briefly divide it into 3 parts. The first part is where we are in the early stages of the resolution process, where we are asking for EOIs and asking the prospective resolution applicants to submit their qualification documentation, all the supporting documents and all that. So I think towards the start, when this process, when this whole lockdown started, there were a lot of delays which happened. It took us about 2 or 3 weeks to convince the PRAs that we may not be able to push the EOI submission timeline, which is absolutely in his control in terms of him, digitally sending us all the information, etc., for us to make an assessment whether he qualifies to be in the initial list, etc. So I think that EY submission, if that's the stage, is not a problem. The problem has really come about in the second stage, where the due diligence, predominantly the commercial technical diligence, has taken a bit of a delay, wherein because of lack of availability and going to the plant is a problem. And the other feature which is come in is that most of the data room which we had prepared all had historical data for him to sort of have a look at it, which is already reviewed it. But I think a lot of requests from the prospective resolution applicants is coming from forward-looking data as well. And predominantly in terms of, his question tune has changed from what has happened to, what is going to be the COVID impact, how do you look at 10 years, 10 months, 5 months, when is the market going to open, etc., etc. So that is the second stage. So diligence, I can say that it is taken a little bit of a delay as far as the process is concerned. But as in now the things are opening up, I'm not saying that it is opened up completely, but it will take some time. The third stage is where the plan is in the implementation stage, where again, for the management committee or the small group of bankers and resolution applicants who've come in, there I think there is a bit of action where the RA actually wants to make sure that the plants are well guarded, the inventory is taken care of, the markets are looking okay, because he's obviously looking at T plus whatever number of days of money he has to be paid and all that. So I think there the scrutiny from the RA has actually increased, and obviously I can see some amount of conversation which is happening from the banks to do a little more extra diligence on a forward-looking basis rather than anything else. So those are the three stages which I think from a process perspective are being impacted.
Thanks, Shailendra. Dr. Sahu, one of the questions which has often come in cases where resolution plans have been called is the inability of the resolution applicants to really assess the value of the company. Because a lot has changed due to COVID-19 and the lockdown. There is increased stress in the system. The order books, nobody is really sure how the order book will look like. In these circumstances, there are cases where resolution applicants are saying that despite the exclusion period that is available to me during the lockdown, I still want to wait it out a little bit and see how exactly the markets are functioning and how exactly the markets will open up. Do you think there is some merit to say that in these extraordinary times, we may want to extend the resolution timelines a little bit more to let the businesses stabilize before you can call the resolution applicants? Dr. Sahu?
It's muted.
Okay. So see, we have a stock market. Stock market price has went down 40% in the first initial 2 months of the COVID. It has again come up, but people are forecasting it may again go down 40-50%. Does the regulators anywhere in the world close down the stock market because valuations are not okay? And if we open after 3 months hence, we will get good valuations. Market does not sleep. Market is 24 hours of value discovery happens 24 hours. In fact, since I gave you the example of stock market, the Indian market opens today at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, but it takes a cue from the markets which have opened earlier in Singapore or Japan. And similarly, it takes the cue from the yesterday close of Dow Jones in New York. So now market is 24 hours, nothing like that. There's a discontinuity, and tomorrow's situation will be better. I will give a good value. The market has to clear. If price is right, the market will clear. That's why I always say that the most rotten tomato also sells if the price is right. So don't let the price, don't restrict the movement of price, and let transactions happen. Every time is a good time for any transaction at that point of time. One takes a view on the value only at a point of time. When time changes, value changes. And you can always say that from both sides, if one gains, one loses. If you say that it will get very good valuation after 6 months, that means somebody has to give more, somebody will get more. So how does it matter if money is changing from one hand to another hand, but nothing happens in the corporate debtor? Money comes from resolution applicant, goes to the pocket of the creditor. What happens to corporate debtor? Nothing practically, except there are rare cases, nothing happens to the corporate debtor. The asset and the value, the production capacity, all things remain intact. So I don't think that we have to say that something a better time will come and we should use astrology when market will go up, then we should do the transactions. I don't think that is the right approach. Market does not believe in any of that.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. Behram, one of again another concern which has really come up, especially in cases where resolution plans have been approved by the COC, and in some cases by the adjudicating authority. The concern really is that are resolution applicants now likely to use clauses such as force majeure clause or a material adverse change clause to walk out of the resolution plans, or at least in certain cases try to negotiate and say that I don't really have any liquidity right now to pay this kind of money. How do you think NCLTs and NCLATs are likely to react to these requests for withdrawal or for renegotiation?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question. And I was just thinking when Shailendra was saying that the RAs are being more cautious and they want to kick the tires even harder and check. I mean, a little bit of this, let's be fair, is also a waiting game. Yes, you have to be more cautious in difficult times, but also they are playing for time. Because the longer time they have, the better the visibility is what we all hope. And as Dr. Sahu said, I think that was very valid that, the stock markets have no such luxury and they price it minute to minute, not even day to day. So I think, end of the day, there are the bank guarantees. I realize that they are a very small percentage usually in most cases. And though they are legally certainly enforceable, and I don't think that there will be much delay in payment even, there will be in this mood and in this atmosphere, after all, the NCLT members and the courts are also human. So there will be some latitude, is my gut feeling. I mean, these things are very case to case. But if you completely try to renege, then I think that the tribunal or courts will be very firm with you. If you ask for time, then probably there will be latitude and some amount of generosity. Same in terms of the price factor, as you said. I would suggest, my personal view again is, I would suggest that people should be reasonable. And if it is a small reduction, take it and close the chapter. I mean, forget IBC proceedings. I'm sure you may have read that LVMH had agreed to buy Tiffany. And even there, they are trying to renege, find ways. I want to pay 15% less. So globally, this is the situation. Nothing novel for us. So you should just be reasonable and close the deal at a fair win-win situation.
Thanks, Behram. Before we open the session for Q&As, and I will read some of the questions which have been set out in the chat box. One final thought from Dr. Sahu. Dr. Sahu, I think we all can agree that going forward, we are going to see the impact of COVID-19 in the next 1, 2, 3, perhaps years. Do you think that we will see the next wave of bankruptcies? And are there any changes or regulatory proposals that IBBI has, especially in terms of regulations, how monitoring of IPs need to change? Is there any new avatar of regulations?
I don't think I can respond to this question, except saying that there is a willingness on the part of the regulator and government to respond as the story unfolds. You have seen the examples of 5 legislations, dozens of subordinate legislations happening in quick succession. So we do not know, since you cannot give me a picture what is there 4 months hence, I can't say that this is the resolution I will propose. But we are willing to act as quickly as possible, proactively, and meet the challenges. So that would be my submission. I can tell beyond that, we do not know what is there after 3 years. But I'll come back to this, your earlier questions, something which came up also in the questions on the screen, particularly about the renegotiation part, and I'll go back to the same example of stock market. When you have bought or sold a share, in the morning you did the deal, in the evening or day after price changes, do you go back and say that I want to renegotiate it? I don't think actually we should not move away from market principles. This is a market mechanism. Again, if market agrees, if the two parties agree to take less, give more, one should not bother. But it can't be a matter of a right, force majeure clause. I don't think. You have done a deal, deal has to be honored, and if you do not honor the deal, market can never work. Market works on that trust. Stock market for last 25 years since also the matter has come. Every day, millions and millions of trades are happening and settled every day. Millions and millions of trades. Not a single trade default over last 25 years. Why can't we think in those terms that a transaction is so sacrosanct? Because if that is why we get between that, we are on contract enforcement, we are at 160, 170. I don't think this is the right attitude to dishonor the discipline of a market. So this is not the right approach. We must honor the market. We must. But besides that, the section 74 remains. But if a market is willing to renegotiate, there is no issue on that. But you should not be expecting this kind of things from market regulations or the NCLT. There was some question about the video meetings. Whether meetings can be called, talked over video. I think the regulations allow that. Section 20, I think regulation 22, I think, that says that quorum even by presence by video is taken quorum. All presence, the notice has to give an option to every person whether to attend the meeting in person through video. And there is also electronic voting requirement. Absolutely, there is no issue that you can't do a deal without meeting a person in person, physically. So you can meet a resolution applicant, you can have a COC, today you are appearing before NCLT by this video. So I don't think there is absolutely any issue in using video to conduct the IRP process. There is a question about section 10. I'm taking some of the questions which I thought are meant for me. I could see that the section 10, the view is that it's fine when a creditor wants to trigger a process, it may harm the debtor. But when section 10 allows the debtor himself to come up and volunteer, why do you stop him? There are two submissions for this. One is that this is a law, this in long title we talk about that balances the rights of stakeholders. It has redefined the rights of government, debtor, creditor, and had told that this is the framework, this much rights debtors have, this much rights creditors have. And that has now been found acceptable, constitutional validity of that has been found acceptable. Now we want to say that we will increase somebody's right, decrease somebody's right. We will say section 10 will remain, only debtor can trigger, creditor will be at the receiving end. While balancing this law, the code consciously strengthened the rights of creditors which didn't exist earlier, like to start the process, to have control, to decide the fate of the company. Those are the basic structures. And you want to say that you take away the creditor's right, but let the debtor's right remain. I don't think this disturbs the balance, this is acceptable. And in any case, as I explained that, the important is saving the economy, not the debtor or creditor. If you know that the consequence of a resolution process is that if you do not get a resolution applicant, which is in all likelihood, you will not get a resolution applicant, you will not get 10 lakh people to save 10 lakh restaurants. Some hospitals are closed today. Will you get another hospital to take over another of this hospital? So you want all the hospitals in the country to be closed. So if you know the consequences of the process, then whether it is a debtor initiates or the creditor initiates, it does not matter. I think there are some other questions, but I'll respond when you ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. So I'll take up some of the questions. There's a question to Behram. Can a resolution applicant seek NCLT order to file a revised resolution plan in the changed context of COVID-19?
Yeah, that's, I think, just the same question that you asked me earlier. So legally, the answer is no. You heard Dr. Sahu saying that judicially also the answer should be no. You can try. I mean, if it can be a consensual renegotiation, otherwise legally the answer is no.
Okay, there's also a question on section 66, Behram, on what is the rationale, why the way that it's worded, the amendment, what is the thinking behind the amendment to section 66 on fraudulent trading applications? Won't this be a moot point as CRPs cannot be filed for defaults during the suspension period, and 66(2) applications can only be filed once the CRP has been admitted?
Yeah, I mean, that may be an argument, but I think why it was done is to make the matter free from doubt that at this point, because of COVID, normally the situation is that the directors who are normally have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders, in these circumstances, the fiduciary responsibility switches to the creditors. And therefore, you should not be continuing with business. And you should be saying that this company is likely to default and become bankrupt or just go for resolution. But here, the answer was that we are not following that process. We are allowing companies more time and to continue. So directors were fearful because they can be charged under 66(2). So to make the matter free from doubt, I mean, yes, that could be one technical argument, but let's make it free from doubt and be clear so the directors can act boldly and continue activities in the company. That is the reason why that was put in.
Yeah, and in any event, I think 66(1), which deals of fraudulent trading, has still not been suspended. It's 66(2), which really talks about wrongful trading, which has been suspended.
Of course, for the director's benefits.
Yes. So Shailendra, there's a question on interim finance. I'll reword it a little bit. It says that the cost of interim finance is very high and often lenders are reluctant to lend to IBC companies. Can we get government to permit use of 3 lakh crores earmarked for MSME to be used as interim finance to IBC companies? So I guess the question is really around interim finance, and do you think there will be increased possibility of interim finance, at least in these times, because so far we've seen a lot of reluctance?
Okay, so thanks, Pooja. So first of all, the 3 lakh crore is only meant for standard assets. That's number one. Secondly, I think interim finance, even during the pre-COVID days or post-COVID days, is a case-to-case basis. If there is a very strong case and bankers would genuinely feel that the interim finance is required to sort of come out with this situation, why not? Obviously, the challenges around priority payouts and sharing of the securities, etc., will continue. But the fact is that there is no change. In fact, if for the bankers, if they feel that the resolution plan may just get a little bit shifted because of this exclusion period, then more likely, because all the working capital is choked up in debtors and inventory, it's going to be imperative for the banks to sort of give an approval to IP for interim funding. So I think the chances and the case for interim funding in the current situation is going to be much higher, to my mind.
Yeah, agreed. Behram, there is a question on the NCLT process as to why normal registry is not functioning for NCLTs, and resolution plans have been pending for hearing with NCLT. Can we expect now an expedited process, at least for the hearing of the resolution plans? Because I think that's one of the concerns that a lot of us have. The fact that there are plans which have been pending for, in some cases, more than a year. And because of the entire lockdown and NCLTs not functioning and specifically saying that these are not urgent applications, there is a lot of concern regarding, in what manner the delay has really impacted the resolution process.
Yeah, I think we should expect that it should be a quicker process as soon as it's, starts a normal functioning and not just urgent matters. And also the fact that a lot of matters that would have come up because of the ordinance now will not come up. So hopefully it should be streamlined, and I'm sure they'll move as fast as they can.
Thanks, Vera. Dr. Sahu, there is a question on by Shrivas Kumar saying that by the new ordinance, any delinquent company not able to pay its debts will continue to avail services and commercial arrangements and create more debts, and as such make the company unviable for any resolution in future. Also, the creditors will be left high and dry with claims for next 6 months or 1 year if extended further. Shouldn't petitions be allowed to be filed, but no final order may be passed to ensure that the delinquent company runs its operations against the interest of the company without any prudence?
Okay. See, as I told you, only IBC has been suspended. And what you are saying, creditor is left high and dry because creditor wants a recovery. What prevents creditor using civil court, DRT, Surface I, Companies Act Section 230, RBI 29 7th June Directive, and so many other things? Why do you think that just because only this bit has been changed, creditor is left helpless completely? I don't think that's what I told that. Please look at what you have on the table and don't look at so much what you have missed, what you have is taken away, assuming so taken away. It is only a very, very insignificant part. You have much more on your table. Please use it if you want. The second aspect you told is that a delinquent company, if it is already a delinquent, it would have an application would have been filed before 25th March. If not, law still allows to file it. But you are saying that it becomes delinquent only during the COVID period. And if it becomes a delinquent during COVID period, and you are saying it will incur by using various services further pile up of the operational debt or maybe in the financial debt. So the people who will be providing such debt, I believe they are business people. They know whom they are supplying and how they will get money. So why should I think that everyone who is dealing with this delinquent debtor, he does not protect his own interest. He will keep on giving his loan and just to enable the delinquent to run the business. Everybody is doing business, delinquent as well as all vendor, all buyer, everybody is doing business and everybody is making sensible business decisions. So I don't underestimate them at all.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. Shailendra, there's a question for you saying that you mentioned that the RAs are looking for forward-looking data. Can you give us a sense of what data are they looking at? For example, with COVID-19, where even economists are conjecturing GDP impact, how does one predict demand data?
So you know, it's not. I can't give you a generic answer. It's on case-to-case basis. You know, things like what are the important markets in the next 3-4 months? Are they in the red zone or whatever, containment zones, etc.? If they are very Maharashtra focused, Tamil Nadu focused, you know, so those kind of, they're also drawing up their projections because ultimately they all have to go back to their own internal investment committees or their boards, etc. So I think a lot of questions from investment committees and boards are coming that before you sort of, before you pay out the money, at least let us get a revalidation. So do I agree with Dr. Sahu that, you know, there is no scope for renegotiation, but it's just that, you know, they just need to go to the board and give an update as to what has happened subsequent to the order coming in and how are the things looking now. So the questions around, you know, is the raw material available on time? Is there any logistics issue? If the logistics issue is there, what kind of a EBITDA, effect is going to have? Where is the demand? Or, for very peculiar things like entertainment, hospitality, airlines, there could be very, very bold, cash flow statements which they will need to prepare. So I think it's very difficult to answer as to what they are looking for, but most of them are looking as to whatever was their projection which was submitted to their committees or to the board. How do they look vis-a-vis what was submitted, and how do they look at the current situation? So those are the more relevant questions we've been asked.
Okay, thanks, Shailesh. Behram, there is one question. It's not there on the list, but separately, certain IPs had emailed us. One of them is a very interesting question. I think part of it was answered by Dr. Sahu as well. Around this exclusion, the period, the 6 month to 1 year period when they are saying this will not be considered as default, the COVID defaults. How does that interplay with Section 29A, for instance, where it says that NPA should be there for a period of 1 year? If the NPA is there for a period of 1 year, then you're disqualified. Would this period, this exclusion period of 6 months to 12 months, where defaults cannot be used for filing, will that be excluded for calculation of the NPA period? And do you think that there may be some relaxation of 29A, given that we will be finding it difficult to find resolution applicants going forward?
No, I mean, both very good questions, but sorry, I don't have answers to either of them. The first one, I have to say, I had not heard before. Kind of the rationale, I guess, it kind of makes sense if there is, and there is also a moratorium from the RBI till August. So then anyway, that will help you, and it depends whether that moratorium goes on further. So de facto, they have already got some extra time. But whether this period will be excluded for 29A, maybe Dr. Sahu has an idea, I don't. And whether, again, 29A, because of the circumstances, COVID circumstances, will be diluted. Again, I have not heard anything like that. But so there's not much I can say about that. I can only say that there are, I think it's in the public domain that, in fact, Honorable Finance Minister also mentioned, so for pre-pack, for SMEs is there, and then pre-pack for the broader corporate world also. So maybe something there, but nothing specific that I know.
Thanks, Behram. Dr. Sahu, one final question, and then I'll ask Mr. Chandiok to wrap it up and close the session. There's another question which we had got earlier regarding the IPEs, saying that are we going to see some kind of a relaxation in the IPE rules, which says that they can only support their partner, given the fact that there may be reduced work and there may be need to reallocate resources for better utilization?
Can you repeat the question? I could not get it fully.
The IPE rules, is IBBI considering relaxing rules for IPE entity? Currently, any IPE can only support its own partner. This needs to relax as flow of work will reduce.
No, okay. So what you are saying is that as of now, an IPE is allowed to provide support services only to its members.
Yes.
Whether that will be relaxed. Again, I will seek the help of an astrologer, but I can tell you that there are many representations to that effect, and that is under consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. Thank you to all the panelists for this wonderful session and for taking all the questions that the IPs had. I'll hand it over to Mr. Chandiok now to give closing remarks and close the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you.
Let me thank Dr. Sahu, Behram, and Meera and Pooja for this webinar that we've done. The series that we have started. We are sure we'll have many more questions and many more webinars to look at. I think the clarification that we have got on the ordinance itself has put to rest many that have been put to me, in fact, the last few days, part of the insolvency regime. So I think the clarification that has come, especially what Behram said, was with respect to Section 10. And the clarification came that we had to make parity between everybody. We can't really, and in fact, I was looking at it from a constitutional point of view, and I thought maybe if we would have excluded 10, then probably there could have been a folly in the law and probably would have said it's an artificial groupism that you have made. This doesn't fall free of Article 14 and consequently manifestly arbitrary and must be struck down. And the very fact that the intent of the government is to ensure that economy gets back to its place, I think everything must be looked at positively. And I've been saying that in many other places that I've now been called upon to help or assist, is that we have to look in these times. Please, I know human being or no government has been without follies, no faults. I don't think there can be anybody. If I work, then I must commit mistakes also. Please, this is not the time for me to look at mistakes. This is not the time to look at my deficiencies. Look at what best I can provide and what best the IBC can provide you. What is the best time for me to look at is to see what is the positive part that it wants to convey. What is the intent it wants to convey to people? So if the intent is clear, intent is beneficial to the people, then some people getting some benefit out of it or undue advantage out of it, I don't think that should be taken note of. And I think I can give you an example of people at every level has said this. Please don't look at ration cards of people to give them ration. Give them ration because food is essential. It's part of Article 21. Therefore, today, if some corporate debtor is going to take advantage of this timeline that we have put in, should not deter us from taking that the insolvency regime is reversed. We have been able to bring it up very well. Thanks to all stakeholders for this, right from the time that we started this until the time we have reached there. So far as NCLT is concerned, I'm sure they'll soon tie up with Nick or somebody else when virtual hearings will start. We are looking at every court today, and notwithstanding that technology has developed a lot, but we still find there are a lot of hiccups that we have sometimes or the other. We are trying to resolve them. Each court is trying to resolve them, in fact. And consequently, the very fact that Dr. Sahu, in fact, I didn't know that Dr. Sahu was in the meeting, which was, in fact, I only had a meeting of some experts on mediation where Dr. Kaul himself came to tell us to look at it. I didn't know about all that detail. I was not there in that meeting. The very fact that the government is parties by mediation process itself is a sign that we want to see harmony, peace in these times of crisis. And I think we all must unite together, all stakeholders once again. Keep the IBC alive, keep the intent of IBC alive. The fact that we have suspended 2-3 sections, as Dr. Sahu rightly said, would not suspend the entire process. We still have amalgamations, we can still go to Khan. In fact, 12A of Commercial Courts Act amendment made in 2018 mandates a mediation prior to a commercial dispute going to court. Therefore, take advantage of that till that such time that IBC is not available. And maybe we are able to resolve. And I must add that on this platform, that in the last 12 or 13 days, 7 disputes having come, not nothing to do with insolvency. I'm talking about commercial disputes having come to notice. We have been able to sit down and resolve many of the issues between them. And I think if all goes well, all 7 will get a resolution process or a settlement at least between the parties. So therefore, I think we should also look at how do we resolve rather than look at only that why this has been done and criticize one thing or the other. I think let's take it in our stride. Let's work on it. And I'm sure time has come when we'll pass this also. No time remains the same. We have passed through many other crises. We'll pass through this also. And we'll probably be back to our normal situation, normal NCLT proceedings, normal NCLT proceedings. Everything will be normal. We can only pray to that Almighty that if we have committed something, please forgive us all, the entire world, and let us go back to where we were. Thank you, each one of you, for your time. Thank you, each one of you, for contributing to this great cause, and looking forward to see you on many more occasions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thanks all.
Thank you.